Hello and welcome to the Amargi Mosaic. We're so glad you've joined us today. I'm Elif Sarican, writer, editor, translator, and your host. At the Amargi Mosaic, we're piecing together conversations from Kurdistan and the Middle East, bringing you stories and insights you might not hear elsewhere. We're a grassroots-funded media collective powered by journalists and academics who believe in independent voices, not corporate agendas. So whether you're here to learn, stay informed, or simply curious about the region, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, don't forget to follow us at theamargi.com and all the social media platforms you see on your screen. Your support helps us grow and keep these conversations alive. So without further ado, our conversation today is about Cyprus, specifically about some of the more contemporary developments in Cyprus from the October 2025 elections in the north of Cyprus to some of the realities in the last few years around British bases and so on. So for many people, Cyprus is a beautiful holiday destination. But what a lot of people don't know is that in 1974, Turkish troops invaded Cyprus, which followed the events of an Athens-orchestrated coup. There's also, of course, a history of British colonialism in Cyprus and still remaining British overseas territories. And still till this day, the North Cyprus Turkish Republic is only recognized by Turkey, and there is a reality there which many indigenous North Cyprusians or the Turkish Cypriots of the north of Cyprus experience, particularly in terms of settler colonialism. So I've got here today with me Oz Karahan, who is going to talk to us about many elements of this. So Oz, you're a Turkish Cypriot political activist, columnist, and current president of the Union of Cypriots. The Union of Cypriots is an organization advocating for the reunification of Cyprus and opposing the partition of it. You've been a consistent voice against both the Turkish occupation and the collaborationist politics of the North's leadership. You've written for numerous publications and have been particularly critical of how both major parties in the North serve Turkey's interests rather than those of Turkish Cypriots. Your activism spans decades of Cyprus's ongoing division and against particularly foreign occupation and intervention. So before we get into some of the conversations about the 2025 elections and some of the other developments in the last few years, and also some of the realities that I think will be very important for people to know around what Cypriots think, believe, and live today, can you tell our listeners a brief history of Cyprus and how we got to where we got to today?
Thank you very much, Elif, and thank you for inviting me for this great program, very timely. Briefly, if I can explain, Cyprus, as you know, is an island just crossroads of Europe, Africa, and Asia. It's very strategic geopolitically. And that's why for not centuries, for millennials, the people of Cyprus didn't taste the freedom. It was always under the occupation of certain powers, from Venetians to Byzantines, from Ottomans, from Turks to British. And Cypriots also a nation that gave a liberation struggle non-stop. And of course, if we come closer to the recent history, the most important event probably when the Ottomans gave the island to the British in the beginning of the First World War, Brits annexed the island. Of course, the population of Cyprus historically consists five backgrounds. As we know, Turkish-speaking Cypriots part of it, the Greek-speaking Cypriots part of it, but also there are three constitutional peoples as well, like Armenians, Maronites, and Latin people. And for centuries, for millennia, these people live together. And actually, they share the same background as well. But as you know, the British, everywhere they did divide and rule strategy. After they take Cyprus, they started dividing people in the censuses, in the culturally and educationally. So they created two main identity on the island, which are the totally artificial identity of Turkish Cypriotness, and of course, on the other side, the Greek Cypriot. That's an identity that exists, the Greek identity on the island for a long time, and bringing teachers from Turkey and Greece to implement the separatist education system to the people. But as people of Cyprus resisted to this, they resisted against the British many times. Like in 1931, there was a revolt which Cypriot resisted. And of course, when we come into the recent history, in 1950s, when the anti-colonial movement started all around the world, in Cyprus, we also have a national liberation movement, an armed resistance struggle against Britain, started in 1955 and continued until 1959 and 1960, the liberation of Cyprus, this armed liberation struggle led. And when we had our independence, Britain continued to put the external elements to the Cyprus issue, which inviting the Greece and Turkey to be part of the guarantor power of the existence of the Republic of Cyprus, and created a constitution that divides the people into two elements, like the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots, and divided the every administration of the country into two. It is similar to what is happening in Lebanon, but of course in Lebanon there is more elements happening. But in Cyprus there is a two. They create the consociational system, and of course the Britain instigated a terrorist movements to end this republic as well, using mainly the Turkish Cypriot leadership, the reactionary Turkish Cypriot political leadership. And when we came to the 1974, as you mentioned, the NATO-backed operation, NATO-orchestrated operation to NATO power Greece and Turkey, made that theater, and since then Turkey is occupying northern parts of the island illegally, and that occupation facilitates the existence of the four another NATO powers in Cyprus. These are, of course, UK, Greece, United States, and France. Why this all happened? Again, just very briefly, because since 1960, since the establishment of the Republic of Cyprus, the leadership of Cyprus became part of the actually founder of the non-aligned movement. Even Cyprus was, before the establishment of the Republic, the first president of Cyprus, Archbishop Makarios, participated in the Bandung Conference in 1955, where the anti-colonial leaders of the world come together. And basically, Cyprus was a vocal voice supporting the anti-colonial movements in the region, in Africa, in Asia. And that was the punishment that Cyprus get to stand with the people's struggle. So this is the brief history of Cyprus.
Thank you so much, Oz. And I think actually hearing this from you, even I've learned a lot. So I'm sure people listening will be really interested in the deep history, particularly that Cyprus has put as a part of the broader anti-colonial sentiments that were happening, particularly around that time, you know, in the 60s and 70s. So it seems like no surprise there. So if we start, I want to start with a bit more of a more immediate contemporary development, which is the 19th October 2025 presidential elections in the north of Cyprus. So according to data presented at a recent press conference of the Union of Cypriots, which you are the president of, the population in the occupied areas exceeds now 1 million. And of these, around 400,000 are citizens of the unrecognized state or only recognized by Turkey in the occupied north, while the number of voters is approximately 220,000, and whom only about 100,000 are Turkish Cypriots, with the rest being settlers. But still, considering this, the elections in the north saw the Republican Turkish Party, also known as CTP, candidate Tufan Erhuman win decisively with a 62.7% share of the vote, defeating the Turkey-backed, Ankara-backed Ersin Tatar, who had been in office for 5 years, with Ankara's intense support and intervention and his two-state solution rhetoric that you and your organization are vehemently against. You've also argued in a recent interview that for you or for your organization, there's not really much difference between Erhuman and Tatar, that both ultimately serve Ankara's interests. Now, I'm also aware that you said that before the election actually happened, but you also said that Turkey has played this game many times before. To maintain the occupation and colonization, it follows a simple strategy. So I do want to ask you what this simple strategy is for you. And also, if we really look at, is there really no difference between these two men in terms of their political background and work? Can you tell people who may not know about, the kind of internal dynamics, if there is any difference between them, perhaps not ultimately, broadly politically and ideological, but if there is any difference between these two people?
Yes. First of all, we have to be consistent about, when we talk about the occupied areas. When we talk about the occupied areas, we are talking about the land that is colonized and illegally under control of another big power. And when a place is colonized and occupied, there cannot be democracy there. There cannot be legal elections there. There cannot be law there. There cannot be free press there. There cannot be free people there. And the data that we share, the information that we share, the colonization of Cyprus by the settlers is a recorded process, well-recorded process. The Turkey since 1974, right after the occupation, started transferring illegal settlers from Anatolia to Cyprus for this purpose. And we have countless United Nations resolutions. We have countless reports from the European Union, and we have countless reports from the Council of Europe. I will give you one example from that. In 2004, Lajso, the Finnish reporter from the Council of Europe, wrote a very detailed report 21 years ago. The report's name is Colonization of Occupied Areas of Cyprus by Turkish Illegal Settlers. It is accessible to everyone. And 21 years ago, he underlined that the number of the settlers already exceed too much. Too long ago exceed the Turkish Cypriots. So, and the numbers that we have right now, majority of the so-called voters are the illegal settlers. So basically, the will of Turkish Cypriots are not on the table at the moment. And the strategy, the Turkey strategy that we were talking about, the basic strategy Turkey continued for many years is very simple. It is Turkey started supporting a Rauf Denktaş, is a Turkish nationalist figure, a well-known figure in Cyprus, responsible for many crimes that happened in Cyprus. Later, beginning of 2000s, Turkey supported the Mehmet Ali Talat, the politician from the same political party of the Tufan Erhuman, who is so-called elected right now. And not only supported Mehmet Ali Talat, even the tapes, the recordings from their phone conversations are available online because somebody leaked that. They made together plans to discredit Rauf Denktaş, a long-time supporter of Turkey. And that was the Turkey strategy. And later, Talat, there was Eroglu, again a Turkish nationalist figure. And later, after Eroglu, there was Akinci, again so-called peace figure or a left-wing figure. And we had, after that, Tatar, who's a Turkish nationalist. And right now, we are having another so-called peace dove, Tufan Erdogan. So the pattern is very simple. Turkey puts a Turkish nationalist hardliner and try to put the table a maximalist figures, maximalist perspective. Of course, that doesn't work. Then bring a so-called progressive figure to put little bit softer version of that with a different terminology maybe, but in the core a same thing, and try to achieve it. Specifically, if we talk about Erdogan and Tatar, there is no difference between these two. Like there was no difference with the previous ones. Erdogan, in his statement just a few weeks ago, said that me and Tatar are talking about the same thing. If we sit and talk each other, we will understand that we are talking about the same thing, and they really do. There is one only difference. In Tatar's term, that was the maximalist demand term, and Turkey put on table the two-state solution, meaning what? Let's divide the island, and half of is mine and half of is yours. Of course, that's something that is not going to happen. The Cypriots and the international community that will never accept. And right now, Tufan Erdogan putting an agenda with his preconditions to sit on the table with his arguments, says that let's divide the Cyprus with some kind of ethnical federation. It's called bizonal bicolonial federation, basically dividing Cyprus into two ethnically sterile zones, and or make a confederation. He says that doesn't matter the name, what name it is. I'm quoting his words. And basically, he proposes a so-called solution, says that let's divide it. Half of is mine, half of is yours, but half of yours is mine as well. What I'm trying to tell you is that of course, the hottest subject right now around the Cyprus is the hydrocarbons, the energy. So he mentions, Tufan Erdogan keeps on mentions that Turkish Cypriots has right, even under the occupation conditions, has right on the hydrocarbons that is around the southern part of the island, which are the free part of the island. Of course, Turkish Cypriots has right when Cyprus is liberated, because Turkish Cypriots are the indigenous people as the Greek Cypriots here. But under the current occupation, demanding something like that is basically asking the world to legitimize the entity in the occupied area, asking the world and Cypriots to legitimizing whatever entity, like in a state form or in another form, legitimize, and that is unacceptable. And of course, there are more examples that there are the same. Of course, Tufan Erdogan mentions that guarantorship of Turkey, which I mentioned to you, the colonial agreement that has been done in 1960. He says guarantorship of Turkey is undebatable. It's my red line. We don't want guarantors in Cyprus. As a Cypriots, we can live together as we lived for centuries. What does guarantor means? And Cypriots reject that. And he mentions about the illegal settlers. I mean, his campaign was more towards the illegal settlers than Cypriots, of course. And he proposed imaginary things to illegal settlers. Like he goes up to saying that if I'm going to get elected, I'm going to fight for you to get a Republic of Cyprus citizenship, which is the free citizenship of the free areas. So these are extremely dangerous things, because when you talk in a maximalist way like this, it is gonna not only ruin all the atmosphere in Cyprus, it's gonna also ruin the relationship between the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots. That's why we are entering the most dangerous period at this moment.
And I suppose there's something to say about how can if it really happened, a former occupying power continue to be a guarantor of liberation or freedom. So I think there's a lot to discuss around that, of course. And also a really important point about the energy, but we'll get to that in a little bit, because I think it's a really, really important conversation. I'd love to hear your analysis and thoughts on that. But you've long documented how Turkey's settler colonial project has transformed northern Cyprus, and obviously you just spoke a bit about it just now as well. From demographics to property ownership, which now seems to include selling off swaths of land to foreign business people, to political control. This obviously mirrors other settler colonial projects globally, yet Cyprus rarely gets framed in this way internationally. How has the systemic replacement of the Turkish Cypriot population with Turkish settlers evolved since, both 1974, and I believe there was also another big wave in 2004. So how do these compare? How has it actually changed Cyprus? And also, additionally, and perhaps also probably a slightly separate point, what parallels do you see with other occupied territories? And why do you think there's such limited interest in Cyprus's occupation by the international community? And when I talk about the international community, I don't just mean other states and other nation states. I mean also international community in terms of people doing important work around justice and freedom and so on around the world.
Yes, very important points. First of all, let's start with the 1974, the strategy of the colonization, settler colonization of the Turkey. Right now, when people think about Cyprus, they think that, okay, there is an island. I'm talking about the international community. There's an island. In the north, there are Turkish Cypriots lives. In the south, the Greek Cypriots lives. And they think that it was the case always. No, it happened after 1974, after the brutal forced displacement of almost half of the population of Cyprus. After the 1974 occupation, Turkey forced all the Greek Cypriots who were living in the northern parts to move to the southern parts. This is approximately 40% of the whole Greek Cypriot population. And vice versa, Turkey also forced the Turkish Cypriot population who were living in the southern areas to move to the north, the Turkish occupied areas. And that was the tragic event where in one night, hundreds of thousands of people become homeless. But it is the pictures, it is the exact thing happening in Gaza today. If you look at the pictures in Cyprus, and even if you look at the protest that is happening in 1974 of the forcefully, the displaced people, you could see the banners over there, "No to New Palestine," because in Cyprus, that was what is happening in Palestine that was happening in Cyprus because of Turkey, and also with the help of the Zionist entity at that time with the West. And in like you mentioned, in 2004, there was a second wave, and that wave is related to the property usurpation. Of course, when people are displaced, also when the illegal settlers arrived to Cyprus, the Turkish regime gave the properties of the Greek Cypriots to the illegal settlers. That is exactly what is happening in the Palestine as well. And until 1995, the so-called state in the occupied areas didn't issue any kind of documents for these illegally given properties. But in 1995, political party of Erdogan, so-called left-wing party, started giving these illegal title deeds. These are illegal title deeds issued by the state that is not recognized by anyone, the pseudo state. And with that so-called title deeds, these illegal settlers and also Turkish Cypriots started illegally selling these properties to foreigners, to Israelis, to British, to Europeans, of course, to Turkish people. And then that's created another fait accompli, because these illegally confiscated properties started changing hands. And this is also against the law. And 2004 was very important because in 2004, the United Nations, with the Kofi Annan, proposed a bi-colonial federation plan for Cyprus. A very bad plan, very imperialistic plan, supported by NATO and all Western powers, basically proposed to create two ethnic states in Cyprus, where limitations of how many Greek Cypriots could live in the Turkish Cypriot state and how many Turkish Cypriots could live in the Greek Cypriot state, and create some Frankenstein-style federation that is basically an apartheid state where you limit who can live where. Cyprus at that time entered to the European Union as well right after that. So if there was a federation like that, that was mean what? That was mean a German could come to Cyprus, leaving the so-called Turkish Cypriot state or Greek Cypriot state, wherever he wants, but the Greek Cypriot wasn't going to be able to live in his own original village because there was limitations, the quota limitations. And of course, the Cypriots rejected that. But because of this plan, Turkey and these illegal settlers advertised those properties in the occupied area, saying that come here, buy a cheap property, and tomorrow you'll be in the European Union. So that started the second wave of the illegal settlements. The first wave was the Turkey systematically sending the illegal settlers from Anatolia to Cyprus. The second wave is basically through these illegal properties of the forcibly displaced Greek Cypriots, the occupation regime and Turkey called so-called investors and developers to Cyprus. Today's historic day, exactly today, because since last year, as Union of Cypriots and also political parties such as Green Party that we collaborate with, started a campaign against these illegal settlements, so-called developers. And we managed to make a Zionist, a Turkish Israeli citizen, a Zionist, arrested when he was passing to the free areas of Cyprus. This was last year. And until now, he is in the jail. And because of these illegal actions, basically the actions that is a war crime and crime against humanity, according to the Geneva Convention and Rome Statute. And it is crazy, but this is just one example. He built 10,000 residential units on forcibly displaced Greek Cypriot properties. And what is his company's name? Do you know? Afik. And what is Afik? Do you know? It's the first illegal settlements in Golan Heights. So shamelessly, these madness is happening in Cyprus, and we are trying to fight against that. Yesterday, the person is named Simon Aykut, got 5 years in prison and from the Republic of Cyprus. Of course, this decision given by the extreme pressures by the Israel and international community, United States, the Republic of Cyprus. And we are right now starting another campaign to keep that criminal in jail and put more criminals in jail. Israeli, Turkish Cypriots, British, German, whoever. Right now, there are other criminals as well who were responsible for advertising those properties. Right now, 2 Hungarian is in jail. 1 German is in jail, and since last year because of our efforts. And we are going to continue our efforts to stop these crimes against humanity that's happening in Cyprus.
And another, big thing that affects and continues to affect Cyprus is, of course, the reality that there are several British overseas territories remaining in Cyprus. And the British, sovereign base areas, as they're called, have made Cyprus a crucial platform for Western military operations. The RAF Akrotiri was used during the Iraq invasion as a staging post and for support operations in operations against Daesh, also known as ISIS. And in the last few years, we've seen spy planes launched over Gaza, providing crucial intelligence that some say may be used for targeting. As someone advocating for a unified and demilitarized Cyprus, how do you view your island being used as essentially an unsinkable aircraft carrier? Does British military presence from colonial times to now represent another form of occupation that Cyprus must confront, or do you analyze it as the kind of British colonial presence, a continuation of it, as in it never ended?
Yes, I mean, this is a very important question. Right now, 3% of the island of Cyprus is a British base. And as you mentioned some of the facts, and since 1974, the island is used for 1960, let's say, the island is used for these actions because British kept this 3% when we got our independence in 1960. The important thing to mention over there, of course, the non-aligned and anti-colonial period of Cyprus, which started continued after the 1960, our president, Archbishop Makarios, which was nicknamed by the Kissinger and the US as Castro of Mediterranean, he was campaigning and he was getting ready to kick those bases out, the British bases. And it was a period in 1974 that we were going to kick those bases out and the British out totally from Cyprus. And that is when the Turkish occupation happened. So I'm trying to tell that the Turkish occupation of Cyprus is basically guaranteeing the situation, the foreign military presence on the island. Again, as I mentioned, along with the British, the US and France is on the island as well, again, taking advantage from the Turkish occupation. We see very simple. We believe in the social and territorial integrity of Cyprus, as Archbishop Makarios did, as his friends Cemal Abdel Tito, Negru, and all the other leaders believed and supported in non-aligned. And of course, we see that the British presence as an occupation, but it is inseparable with the occupation of Turkey, because Turkish occupation basically guarantees the existence of these bases. We have right now Akrotiri bases, as you mentioned. We have the Kelia bases close to Larnaca, and we have also Trodos signal station, where all these signal stations and bases used against the Palestinians since last 2 years, providing the intelligence and weapon to the Zionist entity for its genocide. And not from first day, we are campaigning against these bases for a very long time. Not only us, of course, all Cypriot people. I mean, the struggle against the British bases didn't start in 1974. It started the day after the independence, and it is continuing right now. And sometimes it gets brutal, violent as well, because some political parties, let's be honest, and some organizations especially emerge after the recent genocide in the Palestine, are quite, stuck in the identity politics instead of talking about the liberation. they do events, sometimes close to the bases, more ceremonial things like singing and chanting and whatever. But in Cyprus, in history, we had a very big confrontations against the British bases. In 2011, for instance, there was a national anti-colonial platform established, and the young nationalists and socialists carrying the banners of the Bobby Sands words like the victory will be laughter of our children, and attacked the British bases. And there was a direct confrontation and fight between the soldiers and these people. In Cyprus, people are resisting to these things, but of course, for that we need the international solidarity and international support as well. The last part of your question, why the international community are not so much informed about Cyprus, and there's a very clear answer for that, because the political elite in Cyprus is also with the occupiers, and also the international organizations such as NATO and these alliances, and of course European Union as well, of course United Nations as well, in Cyprus, pushing for solutions like the bizonal bicommunal federation or something like confederal solutions, and try to present the Cyprus issue as an intercommunal issue. That is the main problem, because the people thinks that in the international community in Cyprus there is a problem. There's a problem between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, which is not correct. In Cyprus, the issue is not an intercommunal issue. It's an issue of occupation and colonization. We always say, when you listen to mainstream media internationally, they say that divided island. No, Cyprus is not divided. Cyprus is occupied. It cannot be divided and occupied at the same time somewhere. It is occupied. Because when you say divided, you implement an intercommunal problem. It is occupied. So when a place is occupied, there's only one solution, and that's liberation, not reunification. So the terminology is very important. And they are playing with the minds of the international community with using these terminologies. And we are, again, just repeating one last time that Cyprus is not divided, it's occupied.
Well, one of my follow-up questions was going to be, how do ordinary Cypriots see this reality? But you've already answered that, and I think in terms of language and terminology, as you said, it's really useful to hear what you have to say around, occupation cannot mean division and so on. So thank you very much for that. I want to, as I said earlier on, I want to talk a bit more about all the kind of international headlines and so on we've heard, particularly around the energy developments, in the Eastern Mediterranean, which Cyprus is a core site of, in terms of being able to, of course, extract any of this energy. So the Eastern Mediterranean's gas discoveries have transformed regional dynamics, with Cyprus theoretically sitting on quite significant reserves. Yet the island's, reality prevents it from fully exercising sovereignty over these resources, whilst Turkey, and as you said as well, in terms of some of the politicians' narratives, in the north, whilst Turkey uses military force to assert claims, how do energy politics reinforce partition? Could resource sharing provide an incentive for, whether you call it reunification or liberation, or has it become another tool for maintaining division? And what I'm particularly interested in, because this is what's been in the international headlines mostly, of course, most people who would have heard about this would have heard about it through the role of external powers as in external to Cyprus, from Israel to France to Russia. What role are they playing in using energy to shape actually Cyprus's future and obviously their own as well?
Yes, the these discoveries, energy discoveries around Cyprus, actually, this means for the imperial powers that status quo of Cyprus, what's happening in Cyprus is needed. Because we know that none of these powers would like to leave Cyprus. Cyprus is a Turkish, but also NATO occupied island. And it has because of its strategic location, for them, it is so valuable to give Cypriot people, because when they gave in 1960, they see how the Cypriots joined the anti-colonial world and punished the imperialist powers. So, answer to your question about is there going to be positive situation because of this energy developments? No, it's not going to be. And there is going to be a negative because after the energy foundings right now, the talks about Cyprus is getting to more, let's find a solution to make a route to this energy to Europe via protecting the status quo. So they are trying to right now talking about the so-called solutions that could preserve what's happening in Cyprus, but also help Europe about its energy and quotation mark health. And that is one of the reason is that 2 days ago, Donald Trump proposed his friend, a businessman, John Breslow, as an ambassador to Cyprus. That's very worrying. That's very worrying because we know he sent also Tom Barak to the Middle East. And basically they are seeing all Middle East. I mean, I'm talking about when I say Middle East, I'm talking Syria, Turkey, all that region, because Cyprus is in the Middle East too. We see how they see whole area as a real estate opportunities and all those kind of stuff, and how they're creating another catastrophic situation. And in Cyprus, of course, if the John Breslow comes here, it's gonna be with the same mental. They're gonna try to find a kind of a so-called solution to keep Cypriots segregated and keep foreign military presence on Cyprus, and also steal the natural resources of Cypriots. So that's why we also campaign against all these developments as well. Again, with the Union of Cypriots, with the Green Party, also there are united front formations such as the Pan-Cypriot Freedom Movement, and there are other patriots. Generally, the Cypriot people are aware of the danger. But again, we are coming to an important point. The international community also has to realize these dangers as well. Because when we talk about Cyprus, we talk about today historical point of view and also the today. But indeed, shortly, we could say that without the liberation of Cyprus, full liberation of Cyprus, it's impossible to liberate Palestine. It is also impossible to liberate Kurdistan. Kurdistan, Palestine, Cyprus. These people's destiny are chained together. And the liberation of one of them will lead to liberation of another one. Theophilos is our national hero who dedicated his life for the Kurdish struggle and who killed by the Turkey in 90s. And he is the person that Öcalan said he is our most important martyr, Theophilos. He has an important saying. He said that the liberation of Cyprus goes through liberation of Kurdistan mountains. And we add here, of course, we have to add, and that's the reality. Liberation of Kurdistan goes through liberation of Pentadactylos, meaning Beş Parmak mountains of Cyprus. And also the liberation of Kurdistan and Cyprus is related to liberation of Palestine, liberation of Jerusalem. That is the importance of Cyprus.
Thank you, Oz. And, you and your organization are, of course, doing lots of work around what you've said in our conversation. And importantly, your organization represents a different vision than to what has become quite dominant and mainstream, seemingly quote unquote for like Cypriots and for the future of Cyprus. And, the vision seems, Cypriots united across ethnic lines against all forms of foreign domination and oppression. And in a context where partition has existed for over 50 years, where settlers may outnumber natives in the north and where powerful interests benefit from division, as we've heard from what you have to say, you've spoken about it, of course, in terms of the kind of geopolitical intertwinedness of some of the struggles that you mentioned. But what would a liberated liberated Cyprus in the vision of the Union of Cypriots actually mean now? And what I mean is, beyond the geopolitics of it. And is it still possible to create a broad, inclusive Cypriot identity that transcends the kind of divisions that are imposed? I know that your organization is working towards that. And I guess finally, how do you build solidarity when even meeting across the green line remains restricted?
The connection of Cypriots from all ethnic backgrounds or all backgrounds existed for centuries or millennials, as we say. That's a connection that cannot be torn apart. And today it continues. The Cypriot identity that is mentioned, it's already there. We created an upper identity of Cypriots, respecting the lower identities such as the ethnicity, religion, and all the others. And because one of the most important reasons is that we have a state, a Republic of Cyprus. And we got that state with a heroic national liberation struggle. Right now, we need to give another liberation struggle as well. And that's what we are doing. And that national liberation struggle is for achieving to an island without foreign presence, foreign military presence, and also a democratic society where pluralism and a normal democracy, as we said. We always say why Cypriots cannot deserve to have a normal state where everybody votes and everybody's votes are equal. Because in the 1960 Constitution and in the bizonal bicommunal federation or confederation that the West proposing to us, these rights is taken away. They are creating ethnic lines, and one person is not equal to one vote on those elections. So the Cypriots just want to live in a normal state, like anywhere else, like every people deserves. One state for everyone, for one people, where everybody is equal on the eyes of the law, on the eyes of the state, and live their identity, that Cypriot identity, or if they want to live their other identities, like the ethnic identity, freely, however they want. That is our aim, and we believe that this is a just aim, and that's why we are continuing fighting, not only for us, as I mentioned, also for the liberation of the peoples in the region, in North Africa and West Asia. And we will continue fighting until we liberate our mountains.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Oz. I really, really learned a lot, and I'm sure anyone who listens and views this conversation will also learn a lot. And, as always, I'm sure there's so much more to say. There's such obviously big and deep issues that hopefully we'll have more conversations. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Edith.
Thank you. And that's it for today's episode of the Amargi Mosaic. As I said at the very beginning, we're a grassroots funded project, so your support really helps us keep going. Follow us at theamargi.com and on our socials to stay connected. And let's keep piecing together the mosaic together. Until next time, take care.